Will you make me your lady?
You make me your lady.
Your lady.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Lords of the Screen podcast. I'm joined by my co-hosts today, Kevin Rice and Nick Birch. Hey, gentlemen.
Good morning or evening.
Yo.
What time is it? I don't know.
What day is it? And I'm Kevin Vokes, as usual on the podcast. But today we have a very, very special guest. My best friend in the entire world, Zachary Wigginton. Welcome to the show, man.
Hello, glad to be here.
Long-time listener, first-time caller, man.
It's very true, yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome on.
Finally. I was waiting for the Lighthouse retrospective, but I think this is a good start.
It is. And honestly, we've been wanting to get you on for quite a while now, so I'm glad to finally have it work out.
And
Yeah, I'm
speaking of that, that's actually the reason we invited Zach on today, because Zach, you have a very interesting taste in films. I want to talk about that real quick because I don't believe, we haven't talked in a while, but I don't believe that you watch any current superhero movies or big blockbusters, right?
Well, it's not like out of I don't know, some sort of like disdain or anything. It's just that I haven't really got around to it, and I'm just not super big into like the superhero stuff. They're fine. I like enjoy them when I see them, but I just don't get the like excitement and like dig my claws and sort of thing.
Right. So you don't follow like the cultural zeitgeist of all what's popular. You're not watching Loki on Disney Plus or any of that, right? Like,
Well, Loki one is one I'm kind of curious, and I just hadn't gotten around to it. But like, I don't know. I just,
it's not your
seek
thing.
out things that are just kind of like just more interesting, I guess. And this Green Knight was like a standout.
Zach has an extensive collection of like obscure Polish documentaries about the proletariat.
I wish I did. That would be awesome. But no, it's kind of been interesting because, like, I don't know, sort of recently the horror genre, which I've never been a big fan of, has kind of had this big, huge expansion into these like really innovative auteurs and whatnot. So that's been kind of cool to kind of like dig into.
And most of them have been A24 movies, which is what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
So, we were texting back and forth, and Zach was like, because I see all these movies for the podcast, and I'm like, oh, I've seen this. Have you seen it? Oh, I've seen this. Have you seen it? And of course he hasn't. And he's always
I'm just bad at watching movies is the thing. That's what it is.
And he's always
it's a good thing you're on a movie podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
And Zach,
this is the one movie I've seen this year, and we'll see.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Zach keeps telling me, he's like, well, when it's a really obscure horror A24 film, get back to me and we can talk about it. So, that's kind of what we've brought today. And just as a quick side note, for my bachelor party, whenever I was getting married, Zach and I went and saw The Lighthouse. And that was my bachelor party.
It was a good time. I would recommend that experience to
us at Disney Springs watching one of the weirdest movies ever. It was great, though. Absolutely excellent.
Excellent bromance movie.
Exactly.
It really is. It really is. But we're here today to talk about The Green Knight. So I guess before we do that, we should talk a little bit about A24. We've brought them up many, many times on the podcast. Nick, you've kind of called them Cinema TM, right?
Yeah, that's like their thing, right? They're the Cinema TM, production distribution house. That's what they do. They put out the stuff that like you see the trailer and you're like, well, that looks artsy as fuck. And if that's your thing, you're going to go see it. If it's not, then you won't. That's what they do.
That's true cinema. You ask any film student right now what one of their favorite movies is, you're going to get a Hereditary or, something's going to pop out from this production company, from our favorite director, A24.
A24. But I mean, honestly, credit to them for finding this niche market of, high-minded, auteur-driven cinema that are still accessible in such a way that mainstream audiences can also latch onto them. Most indie art house, studios or distributors, the people don't like their stuff because it's really kind of obtuse or just hard to crack. Whereas A24, they've really nailed that balance, I think, of high-minded, capital C cinema, TM, but still being accessible to the vast audience, which is great. I love it.
It's kind of interesting because you have, your big blockbusters, and I actually was watching an interview with Matt Damon the other day, and he was kind of breaking down the business of what goes on today and how it's really hard to get a film made if you're not a big blockbuster nowadays because DVD sales are just gone. There's no more DVD sales. Everything's streaming. And so if you make one of these, indie art house movies, you can't depend on home video sales anymore. Mm-hmm. And so he was kind of saying that, like, things like A24 are kind of a rarity and they're kind of needed because without it, you're not going to get, beyond Marvel, beyond the big Fast and the Furious and all that, you're not going to get these movies very often, which I found very interesting. And I guess, I don't know, kind of a sad state of the industry, really.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you guys feel that is it just going to be A24 as the player, or are we going to get good indie films?
Well, I mean, A24 is certainly not the only indie game in town. I mean, Blumhouse is there, Fox Searchlight is there. Excuse me, just Searchlight now. I think since Disney bought it, they've dropped the Fox part. Focus Features is still there. There are several indie distributors, but for my money, A24 is kind of top of the heap right now.
Now, Zach, for years and years, you've been this kind of guy. Your tastes haven't changed in movies for as long as I've known you. Like,
I don't know if that's true.
we used to argue. It is true. We used to argue all the time about if The Fountain was a good movie or not, and we would go back and forth. And yeah, I think everyone here can say it's a good movie. I used to hate that movie. I used to think it was so high-minded, pretentious, garbage.
It is a little pretentious. I will give it that.
It is undoubtedly pretentious.
But
it doesn't mean it's bad, though.
I love that. I wholeheartedly love that movie.
Mm-hmm. One of my absolute favorites.
Yeah.
The reason I bring it up is because I think that unless you're kind of an enthusiast, and Kevin, you brought up the point earlier that A24 is appealing to the casual audience. Well, we'll look at Green Knight, and you look at the audience reception, and it is absolutely not. But the critics and people like us, I mean, well, I haven't actually got Zach's opinion on it yet, but most of us here loved it as well. So are they really appealing to the casual audience, or is it just that horror does well?
That's a really good question. What is the audience score right now? I know on IMDb it's sitting at a 7.5, which is really solid. What's it at Rotten Tomatoes? Have you looked?
I believe it's pretty low, but I can look.
Yeah, the audience score. Yeah, well, in any case, I guess when I say the mainstream audience, really, I mean more of a casual acceptance than previous, indie studios would have, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't know.
Right. I think that's right. It's not like Green Knight was never gonna be a big box office destroyer. It just wasn't gonna be. It wasn't its destiny. It's just, you look at even some of A24's best performing films, like Uncut Gems, it made $50 million, which is, not small change at the box office, but for an Adam Sandler movie, probably is. Yeah, it's just, it definitely makes things accessible to have a company like A24 around. Whether you want to argue that means it's appeals to the mass audience out there or whatever, I guess could be a different thing, but it's definitely available to a much bigger audience.
Yeah, I was going to say that, the accessibility thing, because I know, I'm not sure about you, Nick, but me and Kevin, grew up around Beaumont, which is didn't always get these really more art house kind of films, or even more lower budget things. You'd have to go to Houston to see something like that. So it definitely opens the accessibility, and it's not like there aren't film enthusiasts in the backwoods somewhere. It's the casual audience is not so monolithic, I think. So there's definitely people who aren't going to see the big blockbusters only, and they want something else, but it's just not always available to them.
Mm-hmm. So just as I thought this would be kind of interesting, I just pulled up the all-time worldwide box office for A24 movies ranking. Green Knight is ranked number 20th out of 91. I didn't realize they made 91 movies.
Wow.
At A24. The top 5, number 1 is Hereditary with 81 million worldwide box office. 2 is Lady Bird, Moonlight, Uncut Gems, Midsommar. So I think it's pretty interesting. We were just talking about their horror movies kind of taking taking the top prizes, but of the top 5, only 2 of them are horror movies.
Well, Green Knight right now, I looked it up, is sitting at a very divisive 51% audience score.
Yeah.
Obviously, critics love it. It's almost 90%. It's 88. Critics are unanimously agreeing it's pretty damn good. But the audience score is a little on the low side, and I have a feeling from the box office numbers that it's going to peter out pretty soon and not really make them much more money.
Yeah.
Now, I don't really think that matters to A24. I don't know. I mean, obviously they have to pay the bills, and they have a lot of movies that are doing that for them. I think it's kind of like Nick said. I don't think they expected this to be a giant moneymaker. You could say that the marketing was a little bit deceptive. Nick,
Definitely.
when you got out of the film yesterday, you kind of told me that, like, people expecting a big night adventure or a guy going around slaying monsters it's not what they're getting, right?
Yeah. if you can only handle watching a fantasy movie with knights if it involves like serious action, then you are going to be pretty upset if you're expecting that for this movie.
There were people grumbling out of my theater as we were leaving. Just people, that didn't make no damn sense. That was boring as hell. Type thing. So.
I definitely had some walkouts even.
Yeah, did you? Oh, really?
Yeah. A couple of some older people. At least 2, but like maybe 3 or 4 altogether. Just walk out in the middle of the movie.
No walkouts for me, but I saw this in downtown Seattle, so like those hipsters were not getting up. They were going to at least pretend to like it, okay? Right. They're at least going to pretend that it's cinema and they loved it.
Yeah, I saw it kind of in the big city as well. So, I mean, I had a lot of young people in my theater, and they seem to be pretty jazzed about it. They seem to enjoy it. I think that's probably how it's going to skew as well. I think the older audiences are just going to be fed up with this thing. But I guess I'll pitch it over to Kevin because The Green Knight kind of has a somewhat interesting history that I wasn't really aware of until, A24 started doing the marketing for the film. So, Kevin, tell us about The Green Knight and where it comes from.
Well, it is one of the probably more popular of the Arthurian legends. Of course, Arthurian legends being King Arthur, the Knights of Round Table, Camelot, Merlin, all that stuff. Well, there was coming out of early British antiquity were all of these legends that has been passed down through the generations, and the one of the most well known was this poem written by an anonymous poet. Nobody knows who it was, called Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and this is a pretty simple story just about the chivalric ideals, what it means to be a knight. It's a little bit of a kind of a mystery, a little bit of romance, a little bit of sex. It's been one of the more, I think, well-known of the Arthurian legends. I studied it in an early Brit Lit class in college. I think I even might have read a dumbed-down version in high school. It's been made into movies, 4 or 5 times. So did any of you have a prior exposure to this?
I did not.
No.
Zach, have you read it before?
No, I have not. I'm interested in picking up now, but not beforehand. I hadn't heard of it, wasn't familiar with it at all.
Okay, interesting. I wasn't either. I'm also probably going to read it. I actually read a short Vice article right after I got out of the theater because I was just so enamored with the film, and I was reading some highlights of it, and I was like, man, this is pretty cool, especially for such an old piece of work.
Well, it's really interesting because it is very old. It was 14th century. So that was firmly in the Middle English period, where if you actually try to read the original text, you're not going to understand a word of it because it's Middle English as opposed to modern English was just frankly a different language. So it's really the film is a really interesting adaptation in that it honors the original text in a lot of ways while still making some really smart modern adaptational changes.
The first modern adaptation that they did was they didn't cast a white man, damn it. They cast Dev Patel as Gawain, the Green Knight. Now, what's going on? Are these people crazy? What's happening?
We should maybe have an explanation for this so that people aren't super...
Just Kevin being racist again.
If this is your first time listening, yeah. It's going to be bad. No,
blaming the Green Knight's low box office on Dev Patel not being a white guy.
Right.
Yeah.
On the internet because the internet's a shithole.
I was reading our box office, which is a horrible sub. Don't go there. A lot of very racist people there. And they were arguing whether Dev Patel's casting had ruined the film and the box office. And first of all, I don't think that's what comes to anyone's mind watching this, unless you're a huge idiot racist. I did want to bring it up because it has become, whenever these films come out, you even have it with something like Thor and Marvel when Idris Elba was cast, right? Whenever you cast these, sort of like heroes that have been traditionally white in the past, and, that's kind of where their folklore comes from, you get all this outrage about how you're replacing characters. First of all, this man fights like a giant tree man and cuts his head off. Like, come on, it's fantasy. Like, there's nothing. The skin color doesn't have anything to do with any of this. It's a legend. It's a tale. Like, it blows my mind that still, and to this day, that his casting is somehow controversial.
And if you really go into the history of the diversity of the Middle Ages, Europe was a pretty diverse place. It really was at that time, because this was post-Roman Empire, where the expansion from Africa and the Middle East had come into Europe through trade routes. So to say that, only white people could have been in an Arthurian, that's just not the case historically. It is very, very likely that there were people of Middle Eastern and African nationalities in that time and place. So it's just, frankly, just from a place of ignorance, and as you say, just boneheaded racism that people are bitching about that.
And it obviously had absolutely nothing to do with the box office. If you think that, you're an idiot. But, I mean, Dev Patel, obviously wonderful in this role. So let's talk about the film, guys. We're going to get into spoilers now. So if you're interested in The Green Knight and you don't want the film spoiled for you, turn the podcast off and come back when you've seen the movie. We're going to get into some film discussion. So here we go. The Green Knight, starring Dev Patel. Now, I'm going to start off with you, Zachary, because I actually know the least about your opinion on this film. The rest of us had a pretty good time watching this, but I'm just curious in general. Is this something that resonated with you? Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah, definitely. No, I had a good time at the theater. The experience itself was fun. Kind of like beforehand, I had heard good things, and sometimes that kind of puts a shower on your expectations and whatnot. So you might go looking at something, but it met those expectations for sure. I had heard that it was kind of like a slow burn, and it was not action packed, but not as slow as I was expecting, certainly. So there was enough like plot moving forward and everything. Mm-hmm. So overall, I had a good time with it.
Yeah, I do not understand the criticism about it being slow and boring, because I was just enraptured.
Yeah.
There was always something either beautiful to look at or interesting happening on screen at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or even funny on a few occasions.
Yeah, right.
There's even a couple good laughs in here.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen my fair share of ridiculous art house films throughout the years. And, I was fully expecting this to be just, a much slower burn than it was, because everyone was, the people that hate it are complaining about how boring it is and whatnot. And you go into this, and first of all, the film's just beautiful. I mean, the cinematography obviously is off the charts. I love their use of color, like their use of green in the film just in general. Mm-hmm. It's just absolutely beautiful. Like what they dress Dev and the Green Knight in, and like the shades of like the different shades of the forest, and whenever he jumps in to retrieve the head from the lake, it's just totally bathed in like blood red.
Oof,
it's just
that was really cool.
Some really just striking imagery in the film. And like Kevin said, there's always something going on, even though he might not be like fighting a dragon or using his sword. There's always some sort of predicament he has to like figure out, either mentally or physically. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really awesome. Just what a beautiful adaptation of like a fable, like an old timey, like almost children's tale, even though it's very adult, obviously, but kind of like just those fantastical things that you read about as a kid of heroes overcoming trials. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed that aspect of the movie.
I think that a lot of people are going to have an issue with, while yes, there is physical things that Gawain has to like overcome and things that he has to approach from a physical standpoint, a lot of the struggle in this movie is emotional and also just like, I mean, the general idea behind the movie with like, what does it mean to be honorable? What does it mean to be a knight? What does it like mean to even want something? Like, it's all these like questions that are far beyond just the task at hand. And I think that if you're into that, if you're into the idea of a character more struggling with doing what needs to be done versus a dude with a sword kicking ass, then you're gonna like it. But it's like, if that's something that you're not gonna vibe with, then yeah, I would expect, yeah, like we said, to have a pretty negative opinion about this.
It's also heavily symbolic and metaphorical, and this is not a movie that is going to hold the audience's hands. And I think that's probably the what's going to be the biggest complaint, is because, for whatever reason, the majority of the modern movie going audiences just has to have things spelled out for them, and doesn't appreciate or doesn't enjoy things left to interpretation. And this is a movie, much like the poem, that is very, heavily relying on leaving it up to you, the audience, to figure out what the filmmaker is trying to say. And to me, that makes the movie all the more richer, because the four of us could see the movie and come away with 4 different interpretations of the ending. And that just sparks conversation, and it lets the movie live longer in all of our heads. But a lot of audiences don't appreciate that anymore.
No, yeah, Zach, we've had this discussion many times before. Do you think that's kind of what separates casual fans from the mainstream? That ability to like, because you look at something, and I make fun of them all the time, I know, but it's kind of a good comparison to draw here. You look at something like a Marvel movie, and it has your beginning, middle, end. The hero overcomes in the end, and then you get that final stinger after the credits, like a mid-credits scene, and it's like, this happened, and now we're setting up for the next movie, and you get all you need, right? You get a full, complete package. Your characters went from one journey, beginning to the end of the journey, and do you think that that's kind of what people have come to rely on? A lot of people have grown up with these big blockbusters, right? Dominic Toretto drives off into the sunset every single Fast and the Furious movie. He wins. He wins, and his team comes out on top. And I'm curious to know your opinions. Do you think that like people have come to rely on that almost? Is it too much?
I don't know if relying on it that might be too strong, but there's definitely like an expectation. And I think people don't like having their expectations kind of shook if they're going in for like a swashbuckling odyssey, and then they get, something that's not necessarily like, this is far from the most esoteric, symbolic, like film you could see. Like, this is pretty, I don't know, it's not too out there. I didn't feel. There's enough there that you can grab on, get like the basic plot. You might not know a lot of the character motivations, and even like after seeing it, you might have a lot of questions about what's kind of going on behind the scenes. But like the core there of his journey is like pretty understandable, I think. Like, but it's definitely not spelled out as much as people would like, and I think that's just not having the exposure, because if all you've seen is like your bog standard, hero's journey spelled out like explicitly the whole time, then you're gonna have some issues. But I think it's just an exposure thing, really, honestly.
Well, I mean, look at like Star Wars, like the newer Star Wars movies, especially. Like, if something isn't explicitly explained, then it's being called a plot hole. Right. By modern audiences. It's like, there is a difference between something wasn't explained in detail and a plot hole. Yeah. And sometimes things can be left to interpretation, and it doesn't mean that there's a contradiction or a fallacy or something wrong with the movie. It just means that there was something left to interpretation. And I think a lot of these audiences, they want the complete package. They don't want to have to color outside the lines themselves or reach, for something to actually try and find an interpretation or an understanding of the material they've seen. And they want it to be this is the material, this is what it is, and that's that. And yeah, I think that is definitely an expectation for a lot of people. And if you see what looks like a medieval fantasy, then you're expecting a medieval fantasy like hero triumphs over all thing. And yeah, it circles back to this, where it's like, yeah, you're just upset that you didn't walk away knowing every little thing of every little detail and why it was done that way, because yeah, you just don't like thinking about it and trying to interpret it yourself.
And I think there's pretty much going to be no winning with this particular movie, with the people who just need everything spelled out for them, because this is a movie that relies on dream logic pretty heavily. It's a fairy tale. It's an early English fairy tale, and that type of story does not make logical sense by its very nature. There are times in this movie that the movie frankly contradicts itself. Gawain gets this axe stolen from him by this bandit, but then later the axe just magically shows up again. Well, why did that happen? Well, because it's a fairy tale. And I can see people getting just really kind of put off by the post cinema sins era of movie criticism, having to nitpick every single goddamn thing and calling it a plot hole, when really it's just it's interpretive. It's meant for you to just really think about it and put your own interpretation on it.
I think there's like a lot of this idea too that like some of these more like art house sort of stuff, they'll like the director's just like throwing things out there and they don't there's no purpose behind it, there's no meaning behind it, and you're just watching and you're going like, oh, the axe is there, it just doesn't make any sense, there's just no reason or rhyme or reason for it, and it's just not true. Like there's some thought being there, and you do have to think about it, and there might not be a clear-cut answer, but as long as you're kind of building your own sort of interpretation that works, that's like at least established in the film itself, like the text of the film, you're golden, and that's like something people need to be comfortable with.
Yeah, and I think even like the axe reappearing, right? Like my interpretation or understanding of why things happen that way is because Gawain is struggling the whole time with whether he even wants to go through with finishing the game, this game with the Green Knight. And I think that the axe being stolen can almost be seen as like a way out for him too. And it's like midway through the story, it's like, well, no, like the axe is here. The quest is still on, so to say.
You're locked into it.
Yes. Which is, I guess, like a big, part of what the movie is saying, is about being locked into this fate, so to speak.
Speaking of Gawain's quest, I'm going to do a really stupid aside here, but just follow me because I think it's kind of interesting. I was bringing up earlier about how this is such a fun fable, and like, Kevin, you're saying it's a fairy tale, and it is, and I've kind of never seen, or at least not to my memory, I have a very bad memory, but at least not to my memory, I haven't seen a fairy tale done this well on the screen in quite some time. And the other night I was bored, I was up taking care of my son, sleepy, and I stumbled across the old Hobbit movies again. And I started watching them, and they basically just tried to be the sequel to The Lord of the Rings, and they were not successful, they're not very good. And I was kind of thinking from watching Green Knight, I was like, man, if he had just had time or just sort of a different approach to this, the Hobbit films really could have fell into sort of like that fable of like just silliness of like you said, the axe reappearing, items reappearing, just make it a fun sort of mystical journey that doesn't have to be super interconnected. It doesn't have to follow strict logic. And I know that, The Hobbit at the time was expected to be this big blockbuster on par with Lord of the Rings, so they probably never would have done that, but I think so many other films in this genre could kind of benefit from something like this in a way. I love the approach to storytelling here. I like how you don't have to take everything so seriously. If you look at the character of the Green Knight himself, he's kind of a trickster. Like, he's kind of silly. He's a jokester. He's not, upon his introduction into the film, he's scary, but then as the movie goes along and as you get to understand the character, it's all a big game. He even says it at the beginning, even though you might not realize it, and certainly Gawain doesn't realize it. It's all just a game. And I felt that was kind of refreshing, especially from such a big scary antagonist. They show him in the trailer with his big, dread horse, and you have so many fantasy action movies that have characters like this, and they're just imposing, and they're from the pits of hell, and they're ready to suck the souls of everyone involved, and that's just not the case with this film. It's the journey of a man, on this absolutely silly quest to prove his morals, to prove chivalry, and just I had not seen that before, or at least not in a very long time. It's very refreshing take on just an old story, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, it's very archetypal. A lot is made in movie criticism about the hero's journey. The hero of 1,000 faces, the whole thing. And that's what Luke Skywalker is. Well, yeah, it's basically any protagonist in any journey type movie, and this really feels of a piece with all of that stuff. It just feels archetypal in just a really great way. But still, there are a lot of flourishes that kind of push it over into new heights, I think, because you're really in Gawain's head about his doubts, about his not only his doubts about finishing the quest, because it could mean his death, but his doubts about his honor, doubts about his own personal struggles about fulfilling the chivalric virtues and being a knight and being King Arthur's heir. And I really love that David Lowry, the writer-director, took the time to really dig into that stuff and externalize it.
Now, I'm not sure if I'm super familiar with David Lowry. What are some of his other works? Has he done anything that we would know?
Yeah, most recently he's done a Ghost Story, also for A24.
Oh wow, yeah.
That was is it Casey Affleck?
Casey Affleck, yeah.
And there's the one with the 10-minute pie eating scene. Got a lot of press, but he's a really interesting filmmaker because he's one of those that does the one for you, one for me type model, to where he'll do these studio pictures, like he did the Pete's Dragon remake for Disney.
Oh, interesting.
Which is a fine movie, but it made him a lot of money and probably a lot of studio clout to say, okay, now I'm going to make this weird little art thing. So it's interesting filmmaker.
Yeah, I like that approach. You see a lot of actors making that approach these days as well, like Daniel Radcliffe and stuff, and just does weird out there things and occasional blockbusters. So that's pretty cool. I think it's probably one of the ways you have to approach it in this industry. So I guess we'll get into some of our different interpretations of what happens in this movie, because there's certainly a lot of them.
Yeah.
And one of the things I wanted to talk about, because I didn't really even fully wrap my head around it, and I'm not sure if I do now, but I have a guess. What did you guys think of the belt that Gawain's mother gives him, which is, at the end, it's the big thing that he has to give up. He sees the future before the Green Knight's about to chop his head off, of, him ruling the kingdom, and it's all because he left and kept this belt that supposedly keeps him from all harm.
It stays on during sex.
Yeah. It does not come off.
The belt stays on. So I'll start with you, Zach. What was kind of your interpretation of this belt?
I mean, it's kind of established early on, witchcraft is a legitimate thing in this world. So, I don't think it matters too much whether the actuality of it, it does what it says on the tin, sort of thing. What he's told it does. Like the point of it is just that, is he going to keep his honor? Is he going to rely on this kind of escape mechanism to circumvent the whole agreement he's made? And that kind of thing comes up like again and again, where he has these like agreements with other people he meets. And does he abide by it, or does he try to get out of it again and again? And so I think that's like the bigger aspect of it that stands out to me.
Nick and Kevin, is that what you guys got as well from that?
So I kind of feel like the belt initially kind of represents this sort of like, this deception, this ability to get out of it, right? Where it's like, when he feels like he's protected, he's a lot more willing to stick his neck out there, so to speak. And I think it kind of represents that ability to go back on your honor, that ability to, it's the cop out, right? And I think when we get the sort of future that never was sequence, it almost seems to represent his kind of shame. And it's like his deception, his great deception and shame of ducking out on what he's being honored for in the first place, you know? So I think the belt is obviously pretty straightforward in like what it does, but I think like a lot of it is centered around, you know, shame in general. I mean, even like how he acquires the second belt later on in the movie is in kind of a shameful act where he's embarrassed and looked on. He looks on himself, I guess, with disgust. He feels gross in acquiring it, you know.
But it's Alicia Vikander. How can you say no?
Yeah. So the belt it's a symbol for temptation. You know, I think, because obviously the elephant in the room here is the hand job scene when he gets the belt back. But again, this kind of goes back to you know, the dream logic. He loses it's actually a girdle, not a belt, by the way. Well, actually, it's a girdle.
Got him.
You know, he got him. He loses the girdle earlier to the bandit, but it, you know, mysteriously comes back to him. But I don't think it's so much of a mystery if you really kind of, you know, look into it and pay attention, because remember, who made that girdle first of all was his mother. And if you know your Arthurian legends, his mother being Morgan Le Fay, the sorceress, and you know, one of the primary antagonists in the Arthurian legends. So it is revealed in the original poem. And this is one of those really cool adaptational changes that I really appreciate, that it kind of leaves it more of a mystery. But in the original poem, it's revealed that the whole game is a manipulation by Gawain's mother, Morgan Le Fay. And so it's really her kind of behind the scenes manipulating him, and that belt / girdle is really kind of the big signifier of her manipulation, tempting Gawain to take the easy shortcut, to, you know, to don't have to worry about actually being a knight, actually being honorable. Just use a little bit of magic and mom's help to you know, to become king one day. And we see in that ending sequence that vision of being an unhonorable king, how that works out for him. But it really kind of opens up some interesting conversation in the fact that if this whole thing is a manipulation by his mother, including perhaps the glamour of the lady looking like his, you know, paramour back at Camelot. What was her name? Elsa, something?
Yeah, something like that.
Was that really mom?
Are you saying, is that really mom giving him a hand job?
Could be. I'm just saying.
I think his mother was in the room as the blind woman. I don't think.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's probably the more realistic of the interpretation. But yes, but even so, you know, mom just sitting there watching. It's a really complex situation, and one that I think I imagine. Zach, that's where the people walked out.
You know, I think it was earlier actually,
okay.
But
that's pretty late. Like, kudos to them if they lasted that long.
If they had stayed to that part, I'm sure they would have.
This was good until his mom gave him a hand job.
Power of interpretation. Yeah,
Exactly.
Well, overall, gentlemen, is there anything else we want to cover really quick before we start talking about our opinions of this film, our final opinions? You got anything, Kev?
You know, huge credit to the entire cast. I really thought they nailed it. Not only, I mean, obviously Dev carries the picture. He's literally, the camera's on him pretty much the entire time. But some wonderful performances by Alicia Vikander in a dual role. She actually has the standout moment of the film to me. She gives this monologue on the nature of green and how it represents rot.
Right.
And that was just bone chilling, the way she read that line. That whole monologue was terrific. But Joel Edgerton as the Lord, and I never can remember the actor's name, but the guy who played the Green Knight, he was Dagmar Cleftjaw in Game of Thrones. He was Finchy in the original Office. He was the father in The Witch.
Ralph Fiennes.
Thank you. Another terrific performance by him. He's just got this wonderful rocks rubbing against each other, gravelly voice.
Yeah.
that is really, really just a great presence. Yeah, it really just a technical achievement all around. The cinematography is amazing. It just looks so damn good. So yeah,
Beautiful film.
Need to give those people credit.
Absolutely. All right, let's get on final thoughts. You know, kind of what we thought. Would you recommend the movie overall? And did you have a good time? Zachary, you're our guest on the podcast. Anything you want to tell us about Green Knight?
Well, first, I wanted to mention just as another thing that I really appreciated about the film was kind of like the way the camera and editing worked with like time and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I love the shot where it pans around the full 360.
Yeah.
Comes back to a skeleton and goes back around, kind of like mirroring the puppet show.
The puppet show wheel. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and that sort of thing. And then the the kind of future vision sort of thing. And I was sitting there and watching that before it's like the reveal happens and going like, man, this like suddenly like picked up a lot of pace.
Right.
I was like, I'm curious where this is going, because it's just like one thing after the other and like this like weird time skip. But you know, when it's finally revealed and you go, oh, okay, you know, suddenly that makes sense and it kind of clicks into place. But just the use of those like cinema aspects to bring that out was like really powerful. I thought. Yeah. But yeah, overall it was a really good experience. It was fun. I love a good odyssey, and especially one where you're like really seeing characters struggle with these like internal feelings and internal like, what does it mean? Him, you know, talking with the Lord and like just really like going out on this journey without really understanding what he wants, what he's doing, and eventually discovering it at the end as he's facing his own like mortality. But yeah, it was really enjoyable, and I think it's one of those that's going to like grow on me too as I learn more about it and just think on it some more.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't talked about the fox yet.
Oh yeah,
Chaos reigns.
Yeah, I'm glad he's still getting work from Antichrist. But speaking of the fox, he actually, from what I understood from reading an interview with the director, that kind of was an interpretation put in by the director. I don't think he's explicitly in the poem.
He's not. No. But it's just really interesting addition. I thought, you know, to have this kind of natural nature guardian, fey spirit, you know, type thing, trying to lead him on his way and keep him in check, because it's the fox that kind of keeps him from faltering a lot of the time. Like there's the sequence with the giants, you know, where Gawain tries to take a shortcut again, you know, hey, giant, pick me up, take me to where I'm going. And the fox stops it. He howls at him and the giants go on their way. And again, I find that a really interesting addition, that the fox is almost there like his conscience almost, I think, trying to keep him on the right path. But then at the end, it's an interesting twist, because now the fox at the end tries to turn him away from finishing the quest. So it's the really interesting dichotomy of that internal struggle, you know, where he's been trying to keep him on the good path for the whole time, but then at the end it's like, you know what, we don't need to do this. You can just come live with me and hang out in the forest.
Sounds pretty dope, really.
I know, right?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I kind of had the same interpretation you did at towards the beginning, that he was like a spirit guardian or some sort of fae in the woods, and then I didn't know if it was at the end was to symbolize his mother trying to trick him to get to come back or not. I thought it was an interesting turn for the fox to be kind of devious, but most of the things in that he went across were devious anyway. So
that's something to chew on, to really kind of nail down what I think that fox is.
He was cute though.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looked great.
Nick, tell us why The Green Knight is the best film this year.
Yeah, I think I do think it's the best film I've seen this year. I think a lot of it is just because there's so much to think about with it. Like I'm actually excited to watch it again. I probably God, I don't think I'll make it to the theater again, because it's such a chore right now, and there's so few showings in Seattle because of staffing shortages and shit. But I'm excited to watch this one again and really see if I walk away with something different on certain scenes, or walk away with stuff I just didn't notice before, because I feel like this is just one of those movies that there's always going to be something for you when you come back to it. And I'm still thinking about it, and I'll probably still be thinking about it for a while, and thinking about what certain things mean, or like how I feel about certain things within the movie. So I think if you're the kind of person who enjoys that type of filmmaking, where you're going to walk away thinking about what you felt about certain things, or what was trying to be said, or if things have more than one meaning, or there was maybe an interpretation that the directors and writers may have missed out on. I think it's one of those films where you're going to have something to chew on for a while with it. And that's, my favorite kind of films generally.
Yeah, I guess I'll chime in here. I feel, pretty much the same way as these guys do. It's just, to me, it was just such a beautiful, moving story. I really got caught up into just every aspect of it, from cinematography all the way down to the acting. I mean, everything about it just hit all the right marks for me. I really enjoy a good fable. I enjoy a good hero's tale kind of turned on its head. It doesn't always have to be breakneck pace, getting 20 different swords combined to defeat the main villain in the end. It's kind of something just to ponder and think on and think about. And you can go and read up on it, or you can just kind of have your own interpretation if you want to, which I think is a lot of fun. And I get kind of sad when I think about modern filmmaking, and I hope that audiences are willing, just more people than enthusiasts. I hope, more casual people are willing to take a chance on something and maybe take the time to think about something and why the director did it this way, or why it was shot that way, why the use of color is important. And, I know not everyone's going to do that, because these things don't matter to everyone, and that's fine. I just hope at the end of the day, people can watch a movie like this and maybe come away, even though their expectations were turned upside down, it's not always awful for that to happen. And it can lead to a really cool, story or experience that you might not have had before. And that certainly happened with me. And just a all-around beautiful movie. I'm going to buy it on 4K Blu-ray when it comes out instantly. Mm-hmm. I don't buy much physical media anymore like most people. I probably have a bigger collection than a lot of people do. But, my buying has definitely dropped off because of streaming. But this will be a day one purchase. I mean, I want to see it in 4K. It looks amazing. So, yeah, I'd say definitely give it a shot. I agree with Nick. It's the best film I've seen this year. Kevin, I'll let you wrap it up.
Challenge yourself, broaden your horizons. If you go to movies purely for the entertainment value, that's all well and good. A lot of people do that. I think that's great and wonderful. But I think sometimes you need to really just broaden your horizons and look at cinema as the art form that it really is, and just take a chance on something. And this is, I think, a great film to do that with, because it's so wonderfully rich and vibrant and has a ton to say. And I really think if people would just open their minds and take it for what it is, they're really going to enjoy it, or at least come away talking about it, which is what all good art does, right? It gets a reaction. So I would just urge people not to close themselves off from an experience like this, because it's so enriching, I love the Marvel movies too, but goddamn, I would feel completely sunk without movies like this to go along with them. And so that's my message to people, is just take the chance, watch something out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. Mr. A24, you've done it again. You've made true cinema before our very eyes.
Cinema TM.
Thank you. Cinema TM. Again, thank you. But yeah, Zachary, it's always a pleasure, man. Thank you for coming on the show and talking some Cinema TM with us.
Oh, anytime. I'll be on anytime you ask me to.
Okay, well, the next Marvel movie we do, you're going to be
I'll do it. It'll be fun.
We should have an outsider perspective on one of these. It would be interesting, a mainstream movie with someone who never watches them.
You could just hear the shotgun cocking as he talks.
Zach, also, I wanted to give a shout out to your sister Chelsea, because she always is pimping our show on Facebook and talking about how good our show is. Yeah. She is a super fan, man, and I really appreciate it. So thank you, Chelsea, for listening and being such a big fan of our show. We really appreciate it, man. We need more people like you. And if you want to be like Chelsea, and if you want to be as great as Chelsea, you can follow us on all the podcast places: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Facebook. We got a YouTube. Go to their YouTube. And more importantly, Nick, tell us about that Discord.
Yeah, we have a Lords of the Screen Discord. It's, we definitely want some more folks in there, but it's been pretty freaking cool to just have a little spot to talk about movies. We post movie-related memes. We've talked about some, off topic, not just necessarily about media stuff, but it's really fun. I like having a little spot where us and other enthusiasts can shoot the shit. You know,
it really is, because the three of us are such an echo chamber at this point on our Facebook chat that I'm really enjoying getting, you know, new people's perspectives in and that type of stuff. So yeah, please join, because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, big shout out to Martha, Ned, Jared, a lot of the people that are super talkative on our Discord, and some of you guys are mods. We really appreciate it. Thank you to all the super fans out there, and we hope to get some more, so please follow us and please keep listening. We're the Lords of the Screen. We are a film and entertainment podcast, and thanks for joining us.